I suppose the most loaded of all questions dealing with the occult is death, what happens after we die. In many ways, for a lot of people, this is the default reason why they take an interest in either the occult or religion, is in order to find out, is this it? Does it all end at this point? Well, I'll try and answer this question best I can, but with me it always comes back to symbolism, it always comes back to the esoteric world and to find meanings. Now, I'm absolutely convinced of reincarnation, but it's not the full story. I'll explain that to you in a minute. Reincarnation is highly plausible. Reincarnation makes a lot of sense in terms of the recycling of consciousness. Plus we have a general acceptance in all spiritual traditions before the arrival of monotheism and Abrahamic religions from the Middle East that reincarnation was the default, the default state of humans after following death. Now, it was kind of weaponized to an extent in the Vedic and Hindu world, where the idea of karma came in, that if you would be judged in your reincarnated life for what you did on this life, so if you did bad things in this life, you might come back as an animal rather than coming back as a Brahmin or a prince, and so on. It was a karmic sort of death system that worked through your life story, and it had post-world repercussions. What made me believe in that reincarnation is a fact was reading David Conway's book on magic many, many years ago, and he describing the concept of an astral corpse. So basically, tipping my hat to David Conway's amazing book from the 1970s that would change my life on magic. Basically, this is what happens. When you die, you become an astral corpse. What's called an astral, we know as an astral corpse for a while. Some people might call it a ghost. Someone might call it a living dead or something like that. But basically, your consciousness as you knew it upon this earth is fully intact. And you enter into a kind of a dream reality, a temporary subatomic world where you wander and you go through this idea of life reflections. These ideas of not so much a life review, but almost of processing your life and what you did. It's not a judgmental process. It's a philosophical process. It's in the state of being an astral corpse that you can be contacted by your people who want to contact you. Now, there's some very good evidence for this. When spiritualism first took off in the late 1800s, in the mid-late 1800s in the United States and Britain, the common method of communicating with the dead, now they would call them spirits at the time. These would have been astral corpses, people who had recently died. Now, you can also be trapped in the astral corpse state. I'll explain that to you later. But people who died and they were in their astral corpse state, wandering this astral realm, the sort of the world between worlds, and they would be contacted or trying to contact their relatives on this earth. Now, how the spiritualistic mediumship process worked in those days was they didn't use a Ouija board. They would put letters out on the table in a circle, written on pieces of paper or card, and then using a crystal glass or tumbler. It was always crystal, not like, that makes perfect sense when you think of crystal as being a sort of a transmittive medium. Tumbler upside down on the table. They put their fingers on it, and if they would ask the person who was there, they would the hands would move around, spelling the names and so on. When they first began this, they would get terrible results quite often, depending on the class system that they were working in. And the reason for this was simple. The poor working class in the astral corpse reality couldn't read or write. So how would they spell their name out on the table? This is why it became a rage. Spiritualism was a rage among the more learned class, the upper middle class and the middle classes, and the upper classes during this period, because their dead loved ones who were in astral corpse form could read and write. This changed immensely with the growth of education and the growth of public education from 1920s, 1910s and teens on, where spiritualists were finding that they were finally able to contact much more working class and poor and rural people, because they could actually spell and read and write, and therefore move the cup, the goblet, the inverted goblet, into the correct letters. This presents excellent proof of life after death. That's a very good body of evidence we can use right there and then. But it doesn't tell us fully what's beyond that. We can only look towards the world of magicians and occultists to tell us what happens. So basically, when people they die and they talk about these past life reviews that happen very instantaneously and then they come back to Earth, they're seeing the process speeded up very quickly because they're not experiencing the astral corpse state fully. When you experience the astral corpse state fully, what seems like happening in a split second, the life review at the end of someone's life, takes much longer. In fact, it's very much a participatory thing. There are stories of men who worked in slaughterhouses, who went into the astral realms, were contacted by spiritualists, and they spent all day bringing cows into fields in beautiful countryside and taking care of them so you'd have long lives. It's almost like an amending for what you've done. People who were bombers in bomber pilots who killed innocent women and children in war would have to take care of, would choose actually, no, it wasn't a punishment now, to take care of children and civilians in the afterlife and raising them much better. They're giving them a better quality of life. And as all the experiences were resolved, all our transcendental experiences were resolved in terms of our relationship to other human beings and animals and the world at large, this materialistic world at large, within this astral realm. After a period of time, when you had solved all this, you're given a chance, and then what happens is, when you're not given a chance, it just happens by itself. You're either reincarnated, which is what happens most people, or people who have worked through all their, shall we say, resolutions, experiences, and understandings of their existence. They then move out of that field and they raise up and become a kind of a god. Well, they become part of a god. Now, the best esoteric artwork for describing this process is the Egyptian god Nut, or Nut. She's the woman who straddles over the earth and her whole body is made of stars. And this is where you get in Crowley's The Book of the Law, every man and woman is a star. You become exterior to the experiences of the human world, and you become literally a kind of a god. And then you're part of the mechanical processes of the universe. What that feels like, well, our minds could never fully understand it. But the allegory, the best one that suits it of all, is the idea of Nut, and every man and woman becoming a star. Reincarnation, again, has very, very good evidence. There's no discounting the fact that children do remember their past lives in many cases until they're about 3 years old. Sometimes later, some remember it older. But they'll often blurt out to their mothers, "Oh, when I was in the Navy, Mammy, I used to work in the engine room of a ship," or things like that. Or I won't even go there and how many cases of that there are validating that. So between hard evidence of reincarnation through children's stories, as well as some other evidence we have of adults who do remember past lives, I discount the hypnosis thing idea because, again, as Bud Hopkins, the alien abduction researcher, found out to his, much to his regret, that this is basically, you're talking to demons that are lying, that they jump in while the person is under hypnosis. This is why hypnosis is something I have very little time for. Now, so that's it. When you die, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, you will reincarnate after you've gone through this processing of life review. It's not judgment. You're not being punished. You're basically being given a chance to not make amends, but to understand the things you did and its effect upon the world. Now, what makes this especially interesting is that the ideas of life after death may have actually, and these kinds of ideas of reincarnation and so on, may be a process that we've developed within our own subconscious minds. Not so much that a god or a super being created these kind of things for us, but rather, in fact, we have actually as a species developed it. We have developed our own existence of life after death through our evolution as a species. And we're at a very pivotal point now in history. So suppose, just like the bicameral mind, just like the idea that the ego or the sort of the conscious mind is a much later development, probably from post 3200 BC, and we became more sort of internalized in our consciousness, that we probably developed this experience from ourselves. It wasn't a god or a being that did it, we did it ourselves. Just as we've developed our cognition towards intellectual understanding, philosophies, personal insights and so on, which didn't seem to exist prior to 3200 BC, that we can tell, excuse me, also our extra reality world, our spiritual, our psychic world has also evolved with this process too. That as humans evolved and became sort of more aware of their own individual preciousness as human beings, that they didn't want to die, that they didn't want to become whatever, spirits or anything like this, or dreams. If we don't know what our ancestors wanted, we can only guess by looking at Paleolithic, Mesolithic and artwork, and then it goes to Neolithic artwork, and it becomes very, very different altogether. Anyone who's read my book, The Druid Code, will see the startling difference between the pictograms and the imagery of Paleolithic and Mesolithic artwork, and then the sudden arrival of symbolism around 3200 BC in the Neolithic world, or in that general period. So it's a process we develop ourselves. And there's other things we can look at as well in sort of esoteric images of death. From a cultural framework, the Middle Ages presents death in very much as skeletons, very much as the danse macabre. The danse macabre was basically a pageantry to kind of mock death in many ways, and it was always skeletons dancing, and then a couple would break off from these, and it was every race and every religion who was dancing as skeletons. In the Middle Ages, we became first obsessed with the idea of death being represented by a skeleton. This didn't exist anywhere in Egyptian, Hellenic, or any other indigenous art. You cannot find it. It really well, you can, but it's extremely rare. You might find it in some of the Eastern art forms, in some of the Tibetan Buddhist art, but in general, it's just unknown in the West until the Middle Ages. That's because mainly people became closer living in cities, and sort of like death was everywhere in large urban populations when you had plagues and sieges and such as that. And so the sight of a dead body would have been everywhere. So the ideas of things like the danse macabre and the idea of dancing skeletons and so on becomes a kind of a compensatory mechanism to deal with the sort of the traumatic effects of that. It's almost like dark humour. It's really, really interesting. Now, the idea that persisted a long time right into esoteric art. Let's look at the idea of the tarot. We look at, say, the traditional tarot decks, maybe the earliest ones like the tarot decks of Italy. Death is imaged as a skeleton, very much in the Vedic or Hindu Kali form, harvesting bodies, like with a scythe. This kind of idea, cutting, and you have the famous images on the Rider-Waite deck. You have the bishop and the peasant on the ground, meaning that no man or no woman, no matter what their stature is in society, cannot escape death. Cannot escape death. And this was life and death at this same time became identifiable as the same process. We started to see the idea of punishment and hell really came to the fore during this period. In fact, the idea of the cross and the Christian cross at that time, you've heard me talk about in other videos, it have on one side it would have vitae, V-I-T-A, and the other side it would have, you flip it around, you get mors, which is death, M-O-R-S. And the same idea, life, death, vitae, mors, and the same thing was always flipped around in that idea. By the time you get to the 20th century, in the sort of post-occultic world, you have like the likes of Crowley and Lady Farida Harris coming up with the Thoth deck. And the image of death is quite different there, although it has the same general archetype of this skeleton. This time it's at the bottom of the ocean, because we are developing at this point in history an understanding of the subconscious mind and psychology. Remember, this deck, the Thoth deck, is very much a process and a product of its time. And you would have had other occultists like Dion Fortune very, very heavily involved in psychology as well, and the crossovers there and then with like Carl Jung and people like that. But this mechanistic, sort of like almost like transhumanist skeleton at the bottom of the ocean is not killing things as much as scooping up the decayed matter representing the lost, the subconscious mind, and raising it to the surface of the ocean for it to be reborn again. This is a very powerful allegory for reincarnation. And also again it ties in with the idea that some will reincarnate, but the idea if you would join occult orders you would be actually go directly to becoming a star on the surface of the body of Newt immediately. There's numerous archetypes here as well. There's the idea of Thanatos, the young boy / old man archetype of the Hellenic world. He is a kind of a combination of elderly man with a beard and young boy with wings. He also holds a flaming torch down. This is to suggest that he's not prepubescent yet. This is why it gets caught up in a lot of these paedophile cults today. This was actually led to the destruction of Hellenic societies when they took Thanatos literally of believing that pederasty and young boys had sexual power to increase life and greatness. And this is what one of the things that like got me really believing in the whole Pizzagate thing, as there was very strong Thanatos imagery involved in the artwork and so on. But anyway, the young boy has not raised his torch yet, meaning he has not ascended into sexual manhood, and also his ability to raise the torch is the ability to understand beyond childhood his own mortality. And this brings us to the final thing, and this is why I have friends who are atheists and they're very sort of black and white about it, and upsets me, because I would suggest people also then look into the idea of quantum debt. Quantum debt, as I had said in the Middle Ages and other periods, these ideas of, well, the actual facts of things like reincarnation were developed in time. And remember, you may go to hell if you're a Christian and you really believe in hell and you think you're going to go there, or heaven, but you won't. And there's very little evidence for that kind of stuff ever been reported. That's usually unquantifiable, and usually fanatical Christians or people who are raised in a fanatical Christian background come up with these ideas. Islam really has nothing. Islam is a religion that offers nothing to nobody except sort of like OCD. It's a really ridiculous religion. Christianity is a lot better. It's developed a form of mysticism. Yeah, I know you have Sufism within Islam as a form of mysticism, but that's like nothing. Where within what's wrong with Islam? It's still we're waiting for Islamic Protestants, and then it'll balance things out. Judaism has a kind of purgatory type notion as well. Very interesting. But again, it's the same kind of idea. If you look deep enough into all the Canaanite Grail mysteries, earlier forms of Persian mysticism that spawned all these religions and what they became later, reincarnation is a maxim. It's there everywhere. It's a maxim. Now, the idea of quantum debt is this belief that you say to yourself, there's nothing after this. You can literally shut yourself down. This would be also a very ideal population reduction method by the so-called, psychopathic control grid to reduce the population of the earth going forward. But suppose they really are occultists, and suppose that, which I think a lot of them are, they definitely studied it. What better way than to reduce the population of the planet by telling people there's nothing after you die? There's nothing after you die. This could also be a kind of a test You see, atheistic people and materially reductionist people are probably not the intelligent people that they think they are, and are probably not seen as the intelligent people by the sort of social elite, the top ruling levels, as the rest of us, because they know that they're programmed robots, and they're probably no use in a world going forward that we built on very different functions. So they encourage those ones to become astral corpses, where maybe there's a begrudging or even a genuine respect for people like us who discuss these processes like what I'm talking about to you in this video, watch these videos and so on, and discuss these matters. So again, what happens after you die? I'm telling you, this is 100% my belief after 40 years of studying the cult very, very deeply, and moving away from it, coming back again, and being grounded enough to being an atheist for a short while, and then realizing that wasn't sustainable unless I became a Satanist. And I wasn't particularly interested in becoming a Satanist, although I found it very appealing. The problem with Satanism is if you're going to become a Satanist, you might as well become an occultist or become involved in some kind of magical order or some kind of magical lifestyle, which is my way of living. When you die, you become an astral corpse for a while. This is the period where you will be seen by your family members in not hallucinations. They will see you, or they may be able to hear them. You may be able to contact them if you go through a medium, or don't stay away from channels because they're often channeling demons. They're always channeling demons, and you will remain in the sort of astral realms as an astral corpse for a while. Can you become imprisoned within the astral realms? Absolutely. How does that happen? Well, one of the most disturbing ways to do it is when a woman gives her menstrual blood to a man in order to imprison him. Menstrual blood is a very dangerous spell and should never be used by anyone other than put into the earth as a salutation to the goddess Gaia, or in Ireland here, the goddess Eru, and also to bring life back forth into the earth. Human beings should not ingest blood from a woman who's menstruating. What happens is he becomes spiritually bonded to that woman forever. So when he dies, she can move on, but he can't. He's wandering the astral planes in all eternity. This is the archetype of Heathcliff on the moors in Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Heathcliff has basically, on the archetypal, on the sort of the esoteric level, ingested Cathy's menstrual blood, and he's wandering the barren moors, the astral wastelands for all eternity. There you go. Tell me that wasn't a symbol right there and then. But yeah, you see, powerful shit. But yeah, by the way, this painting I'll explain to you another time. It's just huge. I can't get on camera. It's another magical painting. I just put it there to remind myself to talk about it sometimes, and it reminded myself of its own existence. So yes, when you die, you go into the astral realms as an astral corpse. You remain there for a while. You have a life processing review. You go through that function, through that process. If you're an ascended human being that you've been through a lot of lives and you've worked things out, you will be reincarnated. You will not be reincarnated. You will ascend towards being a star. Everyone gets to be a star in the end, and then you're else. But most times you will go back and you will live your life over again. So I'll finish with a brief passage from William Butler Yeats when he said, "All that death is to fear is a short parting from those who are dear," and that's absolutely true. It's just a short parting, and then you're back. And you don't come back in the next time. You might come back in a previous time, a past time. But if you want to contact your dead relatives, you have a small frame, a small window to do it while they're an astral corpse. And that's when it's successful, and that's when it happens. That's when I know when people say, "My granny died 30 years ago," unless she's trapped in the astral realms, they're lying. But people who say, "My brother died last week and we actually successfully contacted him through a medium," they're probably telling the truth. Thanks very much. So don't be afraid of death. Study death as you would anything else, and learn, because mors vitae.